Greta, welcome to the Dialogues.
Hello, happy to be here.
I always feel a little bit like, I don't know, premeditated when I say that, but I always tend to say that at the beginning, welcome to the Dialogues, because it's like a nice formal opening, but it's nice to chat to you.
Nice to chat to you too. Thank you.
So one thing I do actually, because I think of the 13 or so interviews that we've done so far on the Dialogues, only one of them, three actually, more than I thought. 3 have been in Australia, but like the other 10 have been all US, I suppose. And so you're the first European.
That's great.
Flying the flag.
On there.
And I think probably and we'll jump into an intro in a second, but I think probably to almost skip ahead, then we'll go back. But I think probably in terms of me engaging with the diabetes community, for some reason, your social media profile was one of the earlier ones that I noticed. And so it's actually it's nice to actually connect with you, and it's nice to have this opportunity to talk to you a bit about your social media stuff. Before we jump into that, because we will jump into that, do you want to give a bit of an introduction about yourself?
Yes, my name's Greta, as you maybe have heard by now. I live in Sweden, where the days are getting longer and brighter at the moment, which I'm really happy about.
Yeah.
I've been living with type 1 diabetes for 16 years, almost 17 years. And yeah, some years ago, I think 3 or so, I started my social media, which we are going to talk about later, I suppose.
Yeah.
And yes, I'm currently writing my master thesis, and I'm hopefully done in May or June, and then let's see what happens.
That's pretty full on. I've got a note here actually to talk to you about your master's towards the end, because I'm curious to kind of understand what you're up to in that space. I think one of the kind of segues into that is to kind of, I think for anyone who's diabetic, all of these types of experiences, whether they're like academic or athletic or, career-wise, all tend to intertwine, right? Because diabetes is just, as I know, as you know, part of everything that we do every day. I'd love to hear a little bit about your earlier diabetes experiences, when you got diagnosed. Actually, one of the questions I haven't had a chance to ask many people is, what's your glucose level right now?
I can check. I know that I actually had hypo just before you called me. So it's 6.4. I don't know, do you have millimole per liter, or do you have milligram per deciliter? I know that there are 2 different systems.
In Australia, we're aligned with you on that one. So 6.4 makes a lot of sense to me. I am, there you go, that's my reading.
5.1. 6.4 is 115 for everyone who has another.
Oh, there you go. Thank you for converting that. And mine, I just have one of these. I don't know if they're familiar to you in terms of diabetes.
I don't know. That sounds very Australian, actually.
Yeah. I think it's quite an Australian trait. So we're both like in range at the moment.
Yes.
Have you had a good day so far, diabetes-wise? Did you wake up with a good reading?
No, I don't know whether you experience that, but I'm in that kind of time where no matter what I do, I would always go low during the night. I can go to bed with a perfectly stable blood sugar, but then eventually at like 5 in the morning, it would wake me up and it would be low. So I might need to adjust my basal rate, maybe, because it's quite annoying.
I imagine I can relate that. It's frustrating, right? Well, like I have the opposite problem at the moment. When I'm high, I wake up like this morning. I woke up at 11, but like the last couple of days, I woke up at like 15, and like it's quite a sad way to wake up. Actually, I look at my thing and I'm like, oh shit, that's like 8 hours of being really high. Surely that's not healthy. It's frustrating.
No, I know. It's also, I think it's the worst during the night. Like if it's a bit up and down during the day, I really don't mind too much, but just the night is like, it takes so much energy if you don't get to sleep through the night.
Do you
Like
not
if I have
sleep?
to adjust,
Oh, because you're waking up with the hypo.
because I have the Dexcom and then it wakes me up. And I actually also have, you can set like when it's too high, and I have a different kind of frame during the night, so it doesn't wake me up at, I don't know, 9.5 in the night, but I have it, I think, at 15. If it's over 15, I want it to wake me up, because I don't know. But if that happens, it's also a bit annoying, because during the day, then you're awake anyway, and you can kind of adjust, but during the night, and kind of like, and you're like, oh, right, there we go again.
We're kind of jumping all over, but that's fine. That Dexcom alert, because I did a period, a 10-day period where I wore a Dexcom and a Libre, and I have to say there was lots of reasons why I preferred the Libre, but one of them in particular, the alert thing, I thought was kind of nice for hypos, but actually just generally throughout the day as a thing, I was like just annoyed with it generally.
Yeah, I really had the problem in the beginning. I had the Libre one at first, like a couple of years ago. But I really struggled with hypos. Like I had hypos 5 times a day, really low. So I got the Dexcom so that I actually have something to wake me up during the night. And the first couple of weeks, I was so irritated by it, because I was like, can you shut up? It's just was so annoying. But then I kind of just set different, times in range and so on. And there's actually quite a lot of settings you can do. But that's, I think, one of the biggest learnings actually I've done, and maybe that's a good way to start with, is that, that you have the Dexcom on your locked screen usually. Yeah. So whenever you would like to take a look at your phone, you would see your blood sugar level.
Yeah.
And I got so paranoid somehow. Like all I did was every couple of minutes I would check my phone and see, oh, is it still stable, or does it go up, and all of that. And at some point, I think it just wasn't healthy anymore. Yeah. So I deleted it from the locked home screen.
Yeah.
So that I actually have to go in the app to see.
Yeah.
And that it has helped me a lot, because I was just checking it all the time, and then my diabetes nurse, she was like, it's completely normal if it goes up after you eat something. But if I would just see that there's one pile going up, I would immediately take insulin, because I was like, I don't want it to be too high. But then obviously it was too much insulin, so it was chaos. And this is one of the things I've learned with the Dexcom, that maybe it's not too good to have too much control, like to check too often. And so
I'm gonna throw the flow out the window, because I'm kind of, things that are on the topic, we can jump around. Was it your diabetes nurse's recommendation that you went on to Dexcom over other CGM options?
Yes, I think I kind of told her that I would like to have it. Just because we didn't have, like, now I think there's a Libre which has the Libre 2, I think, right? They do have wires. But at that point of time, they didn't. And I really slept very badly, because I was so stressed that I would be low, that I would wake up automatically all the time.
Wow. Yeah. Okay.
Because I was like, oh, what's going on? And then I was like, I would like to try the Dexcom. And my nurse also said that it would really make sense for you, because you're so low all the time, and it would probably, especially during the night, be really great if you could have something which actually wakes you up. So
I had this conversation with my diabetes nurse recently, and it was on the topic of hypos and whether I should be worried about having a hypo at nighttime. And she was kind of very clear that that there was no risk for me. Yeah, and it was kind of counterintuitive, but I trust her because she's so experienced. And she's like, there's no risk for you. You're always going to wake up, which kind of surprised me, because I know people have problems. And I know that in the really drastic, I know that there are deaths that occur through, hypos while you're sleeping. Like a friend of mine had a friend of hers who did pass away from an overnight hypo. So that's the only kind of semi-connection I've ever had to that occurrence, but I'm aware of it. And so
her saying that surprised me a little bit. I still trust her. I have to believe that she's right. But like, it was a moment where I kind of was just, wow, okay, that surprises me, but okay.
Yeah, I think it really depends, because I had hypos and I was at like, I don't know, 3.2 for 6 hours without waking up.
Yeah.
But for me, it really changes depending on how my blood sugar levels are in general. If I'm generally really high, I would already wake up at like 5, or 4.5, because my body was so used to having these high blood glucose levels that
Yeah.
I would feel low even though my blood sugar would be perfectly fine. But then, of course, if I'm in that period where I'm very low all the time, you kind of lose the feeling for it. Like, I really would have problems with waking up if I'm very low in general, because then, I don't know, maybe your body doesn't sense it the same way. I don't really know how that works, but so.
Well, I'm a later onset, so I got it when I was 30 years old, and I wonder if that might be part of the reason, because I suppose it is a desensitization issue, right? Like,
Yeah.
that's what I hear, is that people who've had that many hypos become desensitized, and that's where the risk is.
Yeah. So, but I mean, also everyone has different preferences, and sometimes also the Dexcom is stressing me out. Sometimes I just put flight mode on or something if I'm like in an important something, and my nightmares. I go to a lot of, if it's not COVID, I go to a lot of classical concerts, and it's my nightmare. You sit there in that big symphony hall, and in the middle of it where it's quiet, your Dexcom goes like, Map! So usually then I put like flight mode on also, because I trust myself, like kind of managing for a couple of hours without the Dexcom, because I don't know, I kind of like to avoid these awkward situations.
Yeah, I like to avoid them, but they are kind of unavoidable, aren't they? Like, the number of times, and how many stories have we got, like, where you can talk about those weird, like, I remember one time I was out for a run in the bush here in Sydney, and I was getting low. I think I must have had a CGM on to be aware of it, but I had to run up to someone's front door of their house, and be like, "Excuse me, I'm sorry, but I'm type 1 diabetic. I'm going low, and I need some sugar." And they like invited me in, gave me sugar. Like, and
That's so
there's
nice.
how many
Yeah.
stories? Like, I've got like countless stories of those types of scenarios.
Yeah, I've never knocked on someone else's door, but it's great. It's great that they invited you in. So,
Yeah.
I mean, it's maybe a bit of a problem with type 1 diabetes that so many people still don't really know what it is exactly. So, I don't know. Like, I could imagine that some people would just be there, and be like, what? What?
Well, I've had to walk into stores before and just say, "Hey, I'm really sorry. I went for a run and went low, and can I have something with sugar in it?" And like, they give you like a lolly or something like that. But it doesn't happen that often anymore, but it still does happen occasionally. And maybe it's because I'm not the most prepared. Like, I tend to be a little bit nonchalant about managing in some ways. And I guess they're the results of that.
Yeah, I was just asking, don't you bring anything with you if you go for a run? But apparently not
No,
enough.
but it's you know what, like, it doesn't, like, I've had it now for 15 years, and it's still like, I'll go to yoga, and I'll like, for example, it happened in yoga. Like, I went to yoga, say 2 weeks ago. I went, and I'll always take like a drink bottle with some like sugary drink in it, like a sports drink. And this particular day, I drank all my sports drink and I was still going low, so I had to leave the class. But I don't know, I just feel like that's always going to happen. No,
Yes.
or maybe it's me. Maybe it's
No, I don't think it's only.
does that happen to you at all? Do you have those weird moments you have to leave a situation, or you have to like ask for something, from a stranger?
No, I don't think I ever ask a stranger actually.
How is that possible?
No, I don't know. I think I'm very prepared. I know that I know that I have so many hypos that I always bring enough, I think. And I always bring my credit card, just in case if I'm out somewhere, I can buy something if I need to.
Yeah.
But no, I can't remember anything actually.
Okay.
So
well, that's good
maybe
to know,
it's just you.
maybe I need to rethink. And certainly my wife would say that like I'm a bad manager, because she's like always like, have you got something? I'm like, oh, and she's like, here you go, I remembered.
That's great. Like usually when I go out, my girlfriend asks me the same. She's like, do you have something for your hypo? And then I'm like, here's my, I don't know, Capri Sun or whatever. And she's like, is that enough? And I'm like, I'd bring another one.
Yes, ma'am.
So we need these people who remind us to have our stuff together, I guess. So
okay, so segue from like, I meant to kind of go to this direction before, but I think talking about your situation with your lows and your hypos, I suppose the question that came to my mind was, were you diagnosed quite young, and therefore, you know, have you had a longer period with diabetes and therefore maybe had more hypos in your life?
yeah, so I was diagnosed when I was 9, which is quite, I mean, now I'm 25, so I've been living with it for a couple of years. And I don't really remember times where I had a lot of high blood sugars. I think for me, it's really always been low. Like my major problem is being low, which also, weirdly enough, led to the fact that high blood sugar levels make me so much more uncomfortable.
Really?
Yes, so I can be low, and I'm annoyed, you know, because I don't know, I don't like to go up in the middle of the night and drink or eat something, but if it's too high, if it's like 13 and then there's a pile up, I'm like, oh no. And I am totally that kind of person who overcorrects a blood sugar because I hated so much being high. So
what's your HbA1c at the moment? If that's not too sensitive a question, you don't have to answer.
No, that's fine. I don't check it that often. I think last time I checked it was maybe in June or so, but I think it was 7.0, which
does
was.
Dexcom not give you a guide? Does Dexcom give you an estimate?
What do you mean?
Well, Libre gives me an estimate of my HbA1c, and it's actually pretty close, but it's only an estimate.
No, I don't have it. I think they have that function, but I can't find it. I don't know. Okay. But I was like, it went really down. So my 2020 diabetes goal was to have a H1C. Was it 7.0, 6.0? I can't remember. You know, it's been such a long time since they checked.
They're both good, but 6.0 is like phenomenally good.
Then it's 7.0.
I mean, if you're having a lot of hypos, then that would suggest that you're always kind of towards the lower end, which would mean 6 maybe not out of the realms of possibility.
Yeah, I think the problem has been that 2 years ago, it's gone better now, but before, because I had so many hypos, I would also like sometimes overcorrect my hypos, you know, because I have these very bad hypos where like my body is just telling me eat or die. And then I would eat, obviously, and then it would be really high. So I think that's kind of like, I had some years where it really was from 15 to 2 all the time, you know, and then it kind of equals each other out somehow. And I that's one of the things I'm a bit skeptical towards H1C. I think it's great, but it's also doesn't tell anything about your time and range.
No, time and range is now a better marker.
You can have a perfectly fine H1C, like 6.0, for example, but then you look at the blood sugars and it's only low all the time.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, so I was diagnosed at 9, and then I had some teenager years where I really stopped caring. I know some other people have been through this as well, where it's just annoying. I think when I was 14 or so, I was so tired of it, and it just, I had like my H1C went from 7 to 12,
Yeah.
because I just really didn't care anymore. And then I think since then it's kind of been like going down constantly now, my H1C. But
So what's
yeah.
the what is that mindset when you are and like I'm quite fascinated by, I think I think the adolescent years in, you know, by themselves without diabetes are challenging enough, right? And I am like very much have a soft spot for, like, you know, or like I very much am sympathetic towards teenagers, because you know, like, it's, you know, it's not that much fun for a lot of teenagers, right? It's a tough like period of your life.
Yes, definitely.
Like having
Yeah.
diabetes, and I didn't enjoy my adolescence anyway. I can't imagine whether diabetes. You know what? Some people actually. I spoke one of the guys in the podcast, Jack. He actually kind of like, he said it kind of in hand. He actually kind of liked having, not liked it, but like it wasn't that much of a negative for him. But what's the mindset, I suppose, on your reflection as a teenager with type 1 who kind of went, stuff it, I'm not going to worry about it and let my levels do whatever. Like what's going on sort of as from a mindset perspective?
I don't know. I think something which we are not aware of when we're that young is that there are quite heavy long-term consequences. Like, you know, that's what they tell you. It's like, if you don't take care in 20, 30, 40 years, you will feel the consequences of your high blood sugar. But then when you're 13, you're like, what do I care? It's 20 years. I really don't care. And I can't really, like, I think it was maybe 3 months where I had this very bad mindset. And I remember that it's good old times, you know, I had these blood sugar diary where I actually had to write down, because we did finger pricks, obviously, 10 years ago, 15 years ago. And then we do a finger prick, and then we have this diary where we write our blood sugar level, and then we write our bolus or basal or whatever, and the amount of carbs we eat, so that if you go to a doctor, they can kind of check what's going on. And I really didn't want to have like a confrontation with my doctor seeing all these levels, so I just faked them, all of them. I had like a blood sugar of, I don't know, 18, and I wrote 6. And I mean, of course, I didn't think of the fact that my H1C would reveal my secrets. Because when I went there and my H1C was like 12 and my blood sugar levels were on fleek, my doctor was like, I think he talked to my parents because I was 13 or so, and he told them like, that doesn't make sense, like it just doesn't match. And I remember talking to my dad, and he wasn't like mad or so, but he was like, you know, this will be so bad for you in the future, and so on. So I kind of like got my shit together again, and then I kind of took care of it. But it was like 3 months or so. I was tired of injecting. I was tired of having kind of to look out for what I eat, or not for what I eat, but, you know, like calculating carbs, and then you miscalculate it and your blood sugar's high, and then you would wake up during the night, and I was just so tired. And of course it didn't get better once my blood sugar levels were that bad, but it's just kind of, I just didn't check anymore because we had to do these finger pricks, so maybe I wouldn't check for a whole day. And then my parents would like, is your blood sugar okay? And I was like, yeah, it's fine. And I didn't even look because I just didn't care anymore. And that's so bad. Like, it's so bad, but I think I was just very, very frustrated.
It sounds like you're lucky that you have parents that were supportive, and also parents that you listened to if they gave you some advice, which is not that common.
I think this paints a wrong picture as well. I think a lot of times I did listen to them, but I think I kind of realized it for myself that also if you live like for a couple of months with high blood sugars all the time, you can feel it. You can feel it. There's like before my diagnosis, you're tired, you're thirsty all the time, you feel dizzy, I don't know, you feel sick, and I mean it's not fun, obviously. So I think it was kind of a combination of talking to my dad and or my parents, and kind of realizing that I won't hurt anyone but me. Like eventually I will be the one who will have to live with the consequences, right? And it's not worth it at all. So
it sounds like you corrected pretty quickly, and I suppose in some regards got off a little bit lightly in terms of like, 3 months of recklessness and then kind of back on the course again, which is good. Do you think that the system, so obviously your parents were a big part of helping you and supporting you, and we already discussed, like sort of mentioned this beforehand, but you've lived in 3 different countries, so you've had exposure to 3 different systems. Where were you at the time that you were diagnosed and as a teenager having this
in
experience?
Germany until I was like, and I got diagnosed in Germany. So yeah, I had a really good doctor. I really like him. He was great. I had him until I moved away when I was like 18. And he was great. So it really wasn't like the healthcare's fault or anything. But I just felt like it's not worth it somehow.
So your exposure to, I'm curious, I was diagnosed in the UK, which was great, in terms of like the support and the access to healthcare, as part of like, living in the UK, which is lovely. And then I was in the US for a year, and I actually just stocked up on my supplies so much that I didn't have to engage with the healthcare system in the US. But then Australia, back to Australia. And so I've felt lucky, to have been in these systems that have been set up to be supportive. I think, in Northern Europe, I'm guessing you may have had similar experiences. Like my perception.
If I need new insulin, I can get prescriptions. I can use my prescriptions up to 3 times, and then I just log into my, this page where like you have all your health services, and I text my nurse and I'm like, hey, can you give me a new insulin prescription? And then she sends it to me digitally, and then I go to the pharmacy and I'm like, here's my social security number, can you give me my insulin? And that's fine. Just in Germany, for example, you go there, you have to go to a doctor, and I've not been living in Germany now for quite some years, so I don't know whether it changed, but I suppose not. You go there, you go to a doctor or your diabetes nurse, you're like, I need new prescriptions. They give you this paper, and you go to the pharmacy with the paper and you get your insulin, but then next time you need more insulin, you have to go to a doctor again and get a new piece of paper, basically. So when it comes to that, Sweden's a lot more progressive, and I think it's very, very nice. Like, it doesn't take any time or energy to get my stuff, and I'm in a very privileged position to even complain about that, because I get everything for free. But other than that, I don't think there are so many differences when it comes to diabetes. I'm also a person who doesn't go to my nurse, or I don't have a lot of contact with her, because I feel like I've been living with it for so many years that I can pretty much self-manage by now.
Do you get eye checks and foot checks and the usual checks somewhere, or when was the last time you had an eye check?
In June. They do that once a year here in Sweden and in Germany, I think, as well. They do blood checks, I think, every time. I think I usually go to my nurse twice a year.
Okay.
Here in Sweden. I think in Germany they have some different, like, I think you maybe have to go every 3 months, but of course it depends on kind of the therapy line or whatever you're on. And then they check your blood and your feet as well, as a type 1 diabetic.
Yeah, nice. I don't want to labor too much the system stuff. It's an area that is of interest to me personally, but I think, like, for the purpose of like time and general interest. I think your social media work and like, what's behind that is of real interest to me. And I think I mentioned it at the beginning, right? In terms of like seeing your profile and seeing the kind of messages that you were putting out early on, and that somehow, resonated with me or stuck with me. And I'm curious to kind of understand what drives it and what the motivation is, what the intentions and what the experiences are. So, before you even had say an Instagram presence, do you remember what the what instigated you kind of going, I'd like to have a profile, and I'd like to have a voice, and I'd like to, project it out there into the world?
Yeah, I think in the beginning it wasn't so much about having a voice, and I think it was rather about meeting other people with type 1 diabetes.
Yeah.
Because growing up, I never went to all of these, diabetes camps and so on. I was like, never ever will I attend one of these. So, but that of course also led to me not having any other friends with type 1 diabetes. I literally didn't know anyone.
Yeah.
So I was like, Instagram was also very big at that. I think it was 3 years ago when I created my profile.
Okay.
And I just really wanted to get to know other people. It wasn't so much about, I really didn't intend to start sharing things.
Yeah.
So I did that for a while, and I did some postings, but it wasn't really any good quality. It was just like my food, or I don't know, sometimes my blood sugar and so on. And I did that for quite some time. These letterboards I do now, they're quite new. I started doing that maybe 1.5 years ago, if even. So it really wasn't my intention at the beginning at all.
Which I think is the time that I started paying attention to the community. So I think those letterboards were the thing that resonated. And I think I remember seeing the reaction to them and seeing the responses to them. And certainly, like, if we look across social media in the diabetes community, the reactions and the responses were kind of magnified a little bit more so than other profiles. So you struck a chord in some way, I think. And that's what I think sparked my interest, was like that chord. And like, I was like, wow, like, I can say what it is, like, because the message is very straightforward, but I know there was something in the delivery and just something in the context of it that resonated with me, and it obviously resonated with lots of other people because of the general reactions that you got. So how do you, I don't know, explain that or talk to that? Was that just luck, or like, were you completely surprised by the reactions?
I was very surprised, very surprised. I remember that one of the first boards I ever did got over like 2,000 likes, and it was really like, I didn't have as many followers at all at that point of time, and I was like, wow, that's crazy.
Yeah.
And I think maybe to start with what my intention is, like, kind of the problem with social media is there's so much misinformation, right? And of course people share their experiences, which is great, but it's also not the truth. Like, it can't be generalized, because it's so individual. Diabetes, type 1 diabetes, it's such a individual condition. And I've always been very interested in research, also through my studies at university. And I just started like looking at topics which are not spoken about, and whether there's any kind of research about it. And then, for example, one of the earlier boards I did was about type 1 diabetes and menstruation.
Yeah.
And I really just took a look, because I was like, then there's so many connections between diabetes and anything going on in our body, basically. So I did some research, and there's actually quite a clear connection. I was like, wow, this is not talked about at all. I've been to my doctors for years and no one has ever told me that. And then I did a report about it and I was like, look, that's like type 1 diabetes and menstruation, you can have that and that and that and that. And I got so many messages telling me, thank you for kind of letting us know, like for telling us, because I didn't know that, but it explains so much for me, knowing that this could be a consequence of living with type 1 diabetes. And I think that's kind of what really, motivated me to kind of go on, that people really enjoy having like this research-based knowledge somehow. So then I just really started doing some research. I mean, I have access to our university papers, of course, and Lund University is a very big, prestigious university with a lot of research, and we have a university hospital where they do a lot of research also in diabetes. So I had, of course, the access to kind of research-based material, and I think it's interesting. I learned a lot about myself as well, and I think maybe what people appreciate is that it's kind of information you can trust. I used to also state all the sources I use in my text, so on that people can actually go and, read the original source.
Look, and I think that there's quite a few things that you've touched on, but certainly like it's really easy in social media world, right, to have so many, I mean, it's 99% opinions, right? Or, that percentage is just an opinion. But my point being, I think when you do get information that does have, it feels like it has some validity to it, it resonates in some way. So thank you for, thank you for actually thinking about it in that context, because it's certainly for me important, like in the world that I'm in, like whatever language I'm using, I try and be cautious. We sell patches, not just a patch, and like, it'll be, I try and be very cautious about any claims that we make, because, I don't want to bullshit anyone. Like, it's just a patch. It's not just a patch, but my point being, I think that's what resonates with me is the general thought that's gone into trying to be a little bit accurate in this world, because there's a lot of diabetes social media out there that's just, it's not unhelpful, because like it's nice to have a community, right? So that's good, but like just elevating a little bit and trying to cut through and give a little bit of data or research. So thank you for that. So what was the comment about menstruation and diabetes that you put on the board?
The comments from the people, you mean?
No, like what was the research you were quoting?
No, for example, that people with type 1 diabetes are a lot higher risk to have more disturbances during their menstruation. They have a higher risk for having longer menstruations and heavier menstruations. And also, I think if you're diagnosed before the age of 10, you have a high risk of having a very late first menstruation. And I personally wasn't affected by that, but I know people who have reached out and they were like, I have type 1 diabetes and I got my first menstruation so late. And I didn't know why, but maybe this is an explanation. So it's very interesting. And there are so many interesting kind of connections which we don't talk about, or which also healthcare professionals don't talk about, which I think are very important. Like, so I try to kind of get these taboo topics, which I don't think are taboo at all, but like, I don't know, sex and type 1 diabetes, how can type 1 diabetes affect your sex life and all of that? And I think it's very much appreciated. And now, luckily, more people start talking about it, but you kind of need to spark these conversations as well, right? So
absolutely, and I think that's where social media can be really useful. So thanks for kind of taking that route. It sounds like that wasn't the original intention. You didn't set out to kind of have a significant voice, or maybe you didn't know what the possibilities were when you started off. Now that you do have, or you do see the impact that you can have, does that change your approach to thinking about what you're posting?
I mean, I would say not that much. I didn't make any money of it. So really, if I'm not in the mood, then I just don't post anything. I don't feel forced to do anything. That's sadly something which I think a lot of people who produce very valuable content on there, you know, people expect a lot. They don't see the effort behind it, and I'm like, if I don't feel up for it, I just don't do it, really.
Yeah.
And at the moment, I work, I write my thesis. I just really don't always have the capacity of doing additional research
Totally.
just to provide it for free on Instagram. So sometimes I might not post anything for like a couple of days, or even I don't do a lot of stuff for a couple of weeks, but that's fine, right? Because
Totally.
it should still be fun. I would never do that if I would realize that it's not fun anymore. And then you will have other people who do a lot of meaningful things on there. So I think I just kind of, I would say that, of course, my focus kind of has shifted a bit towards doing these boards, and I post some other stuff, but I like the boards, and I think that's what I'm kind of trying to focus on also in the future, because it's fun and people like it, and I can really tell that and that sounds a bit feeling that I'm important, but I can tell that it makes it has some sort of positive impact on people, and that's just great, right? So
yeah, it is good. It's really good. Did you see the Jonas Brother media stuff in the last couple of days at all?
I heard something. Yes, I'm not really checking social media a lot at the moment, but I heard that. So Nick Jonas, oh god, I'm not, pop culture is really not my strong side, but Nick Jonas, I think, right, has type 1 diabetes.
Yeah, I don't know. I knew he was one of the Jonas guys. I couldn't tell you. I couldn't tell you, like, if I had one of their songs, I wouldn't know it was a Jonas Brothers song.
No, me neither.
So I had heard that I had heard his name around the diabetes community, and I was just fascinated to watch the community, like, just to see some like comments over the last few days, mostly quite critical of him, actually, for not really, and the criticism I was reading, and it looks like it's getting quite sunny there in Sweden today, which is good.
Yes.
The comments that I was reading was like quite negative towards him because he doesn't say a lot. There you go. He doesn't say a lot, but he's being paid to say some stuff by Dexcom, and I don't know, like, I don't know him, and I don't know what he's done in the past, so I don't really have much of an opinion on it. But I do think it's, you know, one of the things that it's fascinating to just watch the community and watch the different reactions that come for these different things, like just general reactions to pharmaceutical companies, or, you know, the languaging towards pharmaceutical companies, or the attitudes and languaging towards these social media figures or these pop figures who come out, and then the types of reactions that they get. I just find it interesting. I don't know if it's warranted. Like, my position on pharma companies is actually that they do a hell of a lot of good. They do some bad probably as well. What do we want to focus on? And, you know, I think it's more of a system issue. I don't know how I got from Jonas Brothers to pharmaceutical companies, but
I think he received a lot of criticism because he I don't know, did some. I think one of the things, and I really don't know a lot about this Dexcom commercial and all of that, but I think one of the criticism was that he basically said diabetes doesn't stop you from anything, blah blah. Why are people still doing finger pricks or something? And he's, of course, very privileged. I mean, it's also, we're talking US, we're talking non-affordable insulin, non-affordable CGMs and all of that. And then if you have someone telling you, why do you even make such a fuss, then I understand that it's maybe not the message to go for in a US audience,
Big
you know.
mistake. Yeah, absolutely. Surprising that kind of mistake can occur, given that a lot of time would have been spent on the exact letters and words that were coming out of that campaign. To think that there might have been short-sightedness to that extent that you wouldn't think about those types of, you know, and circumstances that exist around that message.
But I think probably the problem is that the people who do the commercial, they also on the privileged side, you know. So I think it's always the problem if you don't have anyone making decisions who's actually affected. And you have that in all kinds of different areas. So I think that's the problem. But again, I don't know anything really about Nick Jonas and his diabetes engagement. So
yeah. So look, I think the only other thing was to maybe go off and cover a little bit about your journey in general as we're wrapping things up here. You know, so how many years have you had diabetes for?
16 and a half.
So over the 16 and a half years, you know, what are the kind of standout experiences or standout moments that you've had? Or I don't know, if you were, you know, hypothetically speaking, talking to a young person about diabetes, let's say it was even you when you were 13 years old and you were deciding to, you know, mismanage your diabetes momentarily, what do you think are the kind of, I don't know, standout messages that you've picked up along the way to help people who maybe are trying to figure out how to manage their diabetes better?
I think, like what I usually say in general to people, and especially maybe to younger people, is that I know that there are a lot of negative aspects of living with type 1 diabetes. I know that it's 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, which you have to manage a chronic disease, which isn't always logical. I know sometimes it just does what it wants to. And even though there are all of these negative aspects, for me personally, I wouldn't be the person I am today if I wasn't diagnosed all these 60 years ago, you know. And I think you're not managing your diabetes for anyone else but yourself. So if you're mismanaging it, no one will feel the consequences, but you will. And it's not worth it. And I think that it's possible to have a normal life with diabetes, if you have access to everything you need, of course.
Yeah, we're very
but
lucky.
It does, yeah. So if you, this is like the basic kind of thing, of course. If you have medicine and everything, then it's perfectly, you can have a perfectly amazing life. But of course it takes effort and it takes time and it's not always easy, but in the end it will be worth it. So I try to keep that in mind as well, that I'm doing it for myself, you know, I'm not doing it for anyone else. But I kind of don't want to look back and realize that I kind of screwed it up for myself because I was too lazy or because I didn't have the energy. I think it's every day I do it, it's worth it, because I will hopefully have a long and happy life.
Isn't it fascinating to, well, for me, it's fascinating to ask myself the question. And for some reason, it's only been a question that I've pondered in the last few years for some reason. And that is like, would I prefer to have had my life without diabetes? And it's hard for me actually now to say I would prefer to have had it without diabetes, because I feel like I've gotten so much out of having had it, which is, I don't know if that's a shitty thing to say. And I don't know if that would piss people off to hear that, but like,
it's actually hard for me to think that I would prefer to have lived a life without it. Like, on one level, yes, but actually I think that I don't think I could answer. I don't think I could sort of sit here and say, I wish I didn't have diabetes.
Yeah, I think it really, if I could choose, I would always choose a life without it. And I wouldn't be the person I am today, but I'm pretty sure that I would have found something else to kind of be passionate about. So, but I think it's a very good take. And that's what I kind of try to tell people also, like, there are positive aspects, you know? So I try to focus on that. I don't always have the right mindset to focus on it, which is perfectly fine. But I think if you're so active also on social media, and if you have built like a lot of aspects of your life around it, then you have the disease on one side, but you also have everything else on the other. And for me, it's kind of like two different things almost, you know?
Yeah.
I don't know whether that makes sense, but I mean, you have the condition, which is like a condition, a very serious condition, and you have everything positive you get out of it. So it's kind of like, yeah, I don't know. I'm just trying to, like, I would always choose to live without the disease, of course, every day. I really wouldn't regret it, but of course I don't want to miss everything I have now. And
Yeah, it's a conundrum. It's a classic conundrum.
Yeah, so.
Okay, so just in, I suppose, wrapping up, I had a note here. It was just ramblings, because just in case we were going to spend time rambling, but there's probably been some rambling anyway. Your master's, what are you studying? What's your master's?
I'm studying a Master's of Science in Strategic Communication.
How apt? And do you have a plan with it?
I would love to combine it somehow with diabetes. It would be great.
I think you already are.
What did you say?
I think you already are.
Yes. So I would love to kind of develop that, and I have plenty of ideas, and I will focus on all of that after I've handed in on the 17th of May.
That's exciting.
Yes.
So, like, actually, just to go back a bit. So, I mean, the origins of your Instagram, I mean, kind of what you describe as your master's, there's a massive overlap with kind of what you're doing in social media to some extent, yes?
On my social media, or in general on social media?
With your social media. So communication on scientific, you know, the way you describe what you're doing on Instagram has an element of what your master's is about. Am I wrong in saying that?
Oh, no, I was just basically saying that I am very connected to research, because I've studied 2 bachelor degrees. I'm doing a master's degree. I obviously like studying and research. So I think this is one of the reasons why I was also interested in actually doing research about diabetes.
Yeah.
So it's just, I think you have to also like it. Like, you know, sometimes I sit there and I look for hours to find some kind of research I can use for my letterboards, and not everyone would enjoy that, I guess. So yeah, but you learn how to find research you need also at university.
So to back up your perspective or what it is that you're trying to say.
No, I'm just, was your question whether my studies are related to what I do on Instagram?
Yeah, there seems to be, I was commenting on the overlap generally in strategic communication from a healthcare scientific perspective, and the fact that your social media presence is, I suppose, those things, you know, it is strategic and it is scientific.
Yeah, definitely. I think I definitely learned some stuff which also is like valuable for my Instagram. Like, for example, that I really like these clear messages. That's definitely maybe also something I've learned during my studies, but I wouldn't actually say that there is such a huge overlap. Maybe I've just not realized it myself. Maybe other people realize it more than I do, but I just think that, yeah, what you just said, Instagram is also a lot of strategic communication, right? So
it can be, I suppose, if you use it that way.
Yeah, if you want to. So
good luck with your submission. So after that date, then you can breathe a little bit.
yes, I will hopefully be able to not spend the summer in Sweden again and go somewhere else. Let's see how the pandemic kind of develops now. But I will definitely take some months to breathe. I think that's very well needed, and I'll see. I don't know where I'll be a year from now on, but I think that's quite exciting. So I'm looking forward to it actually.
If we had more time, I would definitely have to pick your brain on Sweden's approach and attitude to COVID. But maybe
The whole other story.
yeah, it's fascinating actually. I think, and I haven't spoken to any other Swedish people to kind of get the take from anyone sort of living in Sweden as to understand it a bit more. But let's save that for another time. Really appreciate you giving us some time today, Greta. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for inviting me. It's very nice talking to you, and you can see the sun is really bright now. So it's a good start to the day talking to you and actually having some sun in my face. So thank you.
It's okay. Nice to chat to you, Greta.